Episode of The Man Who Never Would, a pacifist, feminist Doctor Who podcast. I am George, and this is my co-host Owen.
Hello, everyone.
Now, today we're going to be talking about the second episode of the 1963 series of Doctor Who, which is entitled The Cave of Skulls, originally broadcast 30th of November 1963. This episode was the second episode written by Anthony Coburn, the second produced by Verity Lambert, and the second directed by Waris Hussein. I should clarify that I did make a slight mistake in the last podcast. I said that Harold Macmillan had been the Prime Minister, whereas in fact he'd left office just a month before. So apologies for that. Alec Douglas Hume was the Prime Minister, and the US President was Lyndon B. Johnson. At this point, the characters on the TARDIS are the First Doctor, played by William Hartnell, and his companions Barbara, played by Jacqueline Hill, Ian, played by William Russell, and Susan, played by Carol Ann Ford. At the end of the last episode, the Doctor and Susan had travelled off with Barbara and Ian unwittingly in tow, and ended up on a mountainside with a shadow falling on board the TARDIS. So we're going to be continuing from this point here. And we actually start off right after the end of the previous episode. We see that the shadow is a man called Cal, played by Jeremy Young. We don't know that he's called Cal at that point, but for the purposes of this podcast, I'll use all their names straight away so you know who I'm talking about. And then we cut to a cave full of ancient peoples. So there's rather a lot of new characters to introduce here. I'll go through the characters first, I think. We have Zar, who's the leader of the group, played by Derek Newark. His lover, Her, who's played by Alethea Charlton. Her's father, Hogg, who is played by Howard Lang. And also Zar's elderly mother. We don't find out her name, but she is brilliantly played by Eileen Way. And these characters are all arguing about how to make fire. Zar is urgently trying to make fire for the group because his father was a firemaker who died. That we had a bit of a debate about how he died, didn't we, Owen, when we were watching it?
Yes, we were trying to figure out if the people of their tribe that we were watching were the ones that killed him, or another tribe actually did it, or possibly he died without them knowing what the cause was, and they said it was all the sun that had put him to his death.
Exactly, and I think that that last one is the most likely outcome. Was this group worship the sun, which they call Orb, and in ancient times they were a bit sceptical about dealing in things like magic, which fire was seen as at the time. Zar is being challenged by a new wannabe leader, who's Cal, who's the man that we saw at the beginning. Cal claims to be able to make fire better than Zar can. He's the one who brings them meat, which they're reliant upon. And in addition to this, they're also arguing over Her. Whereas Her is Zar's lover, but she has been promised to the leader of the tribe, and if Cal takes over as leader, Her will be given by her father Hogg to Cal instead, whereas she wants to stay with Zar. So at this point we head back to the TARDIS.
Yeah, Ian and Barbara are recovering from travelling to their new destination. The Doctor is checking where they are by fiddling with his machine, his TARDIS, checking the coordinates and the notes and everything on there and the readings. And he looks over to them and says, "What are you doing down there?" As if they should have been okay with travelling like he was. He's a bit confused by that.
I think that this is the first time the Doctor's travelled with people who aren't from Gallifrey, isn't it?
And he says to them, "New world for you." And then Ian finally gets up and looks out at the screen, to the screen of the TARDIS, so they can see outside. And he says, "Sand and rock, that's all he can see."
Eventually, they go out of the TARDIS after the Doctor's checked all his coordinates and something that he calls a yearometer, which has apparently been playing up in the TARDIS.
It's the first sign already that the TARDIS is playing up.
Yes, it's not the only thing that's played up in the TARDIS, of course, because when they go out, they find that the chameleon circuit is broken. They don't call it a chameleon circuit at this point, but that's what we discover it to be later. And
yes,
that the TARDIS,
why hasn't it changed, the Doctor says?
Because the TARDIS is meant to disguise itself wherever it lands.
They actually mention it a bit later in the story, because Susan talks to Barbara about it.
I think it's a rather wonderful way they have of explaining their lack of budget. Because I think someone would have questioned this. And there's also something they don't explain in this episode, but they do. It's another thing they explain subsequently, which is why is it that all the cavemen speak English?
They've not mentioned that yet, have they?
They haven't mentioned that yet. I think this was something that people asked about at the time.
They bring in it later, yeah.
They do bring it in later. Do they bring that in the classic series?
Yes, they do.
They do specify it, yeah.
I'm pretty sure they do, anyway.
Here's one thing that would be fun on this podcast, working out what it would have disguised itself as everywhere they go. What would it be in this era? I think maybe a tree?
Yes, a tree.
Yeah.
Yes, because they even say later on that one of them describes it as a tree, so... One of the cavemen.
Good point. Let's continue doing that for the subsequent podcast.
Yes, that'd be really good fun.
Yeah. The Doctor wanders a bit apart from them. He just fancies a bit of a smoke.
Yeah, as you do.
As you do. And he lights his pipe, and he just happens to be seen by someone who's desperate to acquire fire. So he's kidnapped. The other companions hear him yell.
And they find all his belongings on the floor left. Oh, the Doctor's notes. He wouldn't leave his notes behind like that, wouldn't leave them about, so they start to panic. And as you say, they hear him scream in the distance. Well, what's wrong with the Doctor? The
Doctor is taken back to the tribe. Initially, he's unconscious, although he does soon regain consciousness. He quickly realises what they're arguing about and offers to make fire for them, but it's more complicated than that. Firstly, he hasn't got his matches, but more importantly, because just making the fire isn't enough. The fire is, for want of a better term, a smokescreen. What's more important about this is that Zar and Cal are fighting over who's going to be the leader and fighting over who's going to be with her.
And I love it when Cal says, smoke comes from his mouth, and Zar says, like lies come from yours.
That is a beautiful line, isn't it, Owen?
Poetic.
At this point, the companions arrive. There's a lot of screaming from Susan. And a particularly interesting bit where Cal is about to kill Barbara and Zar intervenes, not out of any concern for Barbara's welfare, but by saying, if it's meant to be, Orb will kill her.
Kill him! Kill him! Wait! We cannot kill all our enemies! When Orb gives fire back to the sky, let him look down on them. Then, that is when they die. And Orb will give us fire. Take them to the Cave of Skulls.
And at the end, they're taken to the Cave of Skulls, the Cave of Skulls of the title, and they awake in the Cave of Skulls, and Ian discovers that all the skulls have holes in their heads. And that's the end of the episode.
And then it's the end of the episode, yeah. So, what did you think of this one, George?
Who knew that they would be able to make a full Doctor Who episode, essentially about someone smoking?
Yes, that's true. Well, it does tell kids don't smoke, because you might get attacked and taken to a cave and imprisoned.
Well, don't smoke. You know, that was a very up-to-date message for 1963, wasn't it? I think it also goes to show how a good Doctor Who story can come from even the most basic of ideas, because this is not the most complex story ever. And I actually think that in more recent episodes, it's the ones with the more complicated stories that I've enjoyed less, because I struggle to quite get my head around them. I think it's interesting that it was called the Cave of Skulls, actually, because we don't actually spend any time there until the very end. Maybe that would have made more sense to be the title of episode 3.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, I do like it as the title for this episode, because it's such a scary title. And even though we don't actually see it until the end, the threat of the Cave of Skulls lingers across the whole episode.
Yeah, as a viewer, you're kind of waiting for it to happen. You like, but not in a way that ruins the story. Like you said, a good threat and fear that keeps you gripped to the TV screen. It's a really good episode 2. It's a great introduction, great setup of the story. It tells you exactly where this story is going to be based. It's prehistoric Earth. We've got the new characters who are the cave dwellers, and of course, they are trying to make fire, which is something that a lot of people are aware around this time would have been a big thing. Even if you weren't really into your history, you'd know there's a common story around this time.
Very much so, yes. I think at this point it's very obvious that they were going for Sidney Newman's no bug-eyed monsters idea.
Definitely, 100%. It's gone down the educational route as Sidney Newman asked for.
Very much so. Well, I think The Daleks is the second serial, isn't it? So a couple of episodes beyond from this one. So it seems like quite a fair compromise they did there, which was the first serial. They had a cave of olden times, early humans.
Well, you say compromise. I'm not really sure if Sidney Newman would have allowed it if he's aware of it. I think it was quite risky. I might be wrong on this one. We'll have to look into it when we get to that bit of the podcast, but I'm pretty sure Rarity kind of risked it because she loved Terry Nation's script so much.
Well, I'm sure that'll be a really interesting thing to talk about when we get there. So in terms of characterisation, there's a lot to go on.
In the sense of the main characters or the new characters?
Well, I think all of them. I mean, the main characters were introduced last time, and we get an update on how they're all doing, and I think all the characterisation is consistent from last time. But we've also got 5 new characters. We've got Tsar, Cal, Her, Horg, and the Old Mother. They get a lot less screen time than the 4 main characters did in the previous episode, and yet I feel that they all come across as really well fleshed out.
They really do, and I just want to say that from a feminism outlook, hers, obviously, she's told that she must...
She has to get with the leader.
The leader as a partner, that's the commands from her father, but she wants to be with Tsar, whatever the scenario.
We also have the Old Mother, who is very, very sceptical of Tsar's ability to make fire, and I suppose actually more than just sceptical about his ability, she also doesn't think they should be doing it. She's probably a bit more superstitious than him. And I think that's obvious because she's a bit older than the other characters, less open to the modern ways of doing things. So
she talks like she's in a prophecy all the time, isn't she? She doesn't actually talk normal sentences.
She does.
She's in the corner, just threatening everyone and making them fear.
She's actually a very sinister character, isn't she? And I think we need someone like that in this episode because obviously in this first serial, we don't actually have any aliens.
No. Well, apart from the Doctor, of course, and Susan.
Apart from the Doctor and Susan, but that's a given.
The feminism side of this story is that, obviously, the writers take into account that in prehistoric Earth, the men would have been more powerful, but what's really great is they've got some strong women characters like hers and the Old Mother, who, even though they are looked down upon, they still stand and show that they've got more wisdom and more to them than the society that they're in makes out that they are. So it's actually got a really good, strong feminism outlook there for the time that the story is based, which is great, and the writers took that into account.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it's something that feminist writers have struggled with a lot in various forms of media, which is how do you show a strong female character or a strong feminist character in a world which is inherently patriarchal. It's something that, for example, Philip Pullman struggles with in his Dark Materials, because we've talked a lot about that. There are still very strong female characters, but they're shown as using their skill in ways involving words and charm and grace. That's something which also feeds into our point about pacifism. The people in this tribe who, from an immediate glance, have the most power are the 3 male characters, who are Tsar the leader, Cal the wannabe leader, and Horg, who is Her's father. However, when you actually hear their conversations, you see that the ones who are influential and the ones who talk to others and influence others' opinions are Her and the Old Mother. They can use their words and make other people feel like their ideas are their ideas. And that's a very important skill to have, especially given that our podcast is about pacifism. It shows that the power of words is actually stronger than the power of physical strength.
And it's really great that the Doctor does this as well.
He does.
And it's very true to his character, and I know that he does get a bit action-typey later in this show, even though they confront that. But at the moment, he really is the Doctor that we see now, I think. Eccleston, Tennant, Smith, Capaldi, you really see a lot of Hartnell in them, actually.
Do you think there's been a bit of Hartnell in every Doctor?
I can't really say yet. I need to see all these episodes properly as we go through this. The whole point of doing this podcast.
Definitely. Good answer.
And what's really interesting here, actually, is the first story where they actually travel and have an adventure, proper adventure. The Doctor is the one that gets taken away, and it's the companions that have to go and find him and rescue him.
Exactly, which surprises me because I've always been led to believe that in the early stories in particular, the companions were always there to get into trouble and just to show how good the Doctor was. And on this episode, there isn't. I don't want to talk too much about later episodes, but I think there's even something similar in the Dalek story, isn't there? The Doctor misleads them or something.
Quite possibly,
and leads them into danger.
But it's really nice that the first adventure story, though, even as the second episode, actually does this, because it just shows people's perception of Doctor Who, because maybe in later episodes they do it that way. They didn't do it the first time round, and I think that's quite a good thing to be aware of, really, because, like you said, these days they look at William Hartnell era as if it was this really old-fashioned way of storytelling and how it's always the male hero. But no, they're all equals. They're all stuck on this planet. They're all trying to help each other out. Like, even the Doctor later tries to help them by using his words rather over violence. Again, another Doctor's trait that was already put in there early on in the show. But there's no, I'm the Doctor and I'm here to save the day because I am a strong male hero. There's nothing about that. It's just all of them working together, actually.
And actually what you were saying about old-fashioned way of storytelling, I actually think that that's what made Doctor Who last so long.
I agree with you there,
it had a different way of storytelling. I'm not sure whether the Doctor's lack of action in this episode is because he's an elderly man or because he's a pacifist. I think maybe the writers hadn't quite decided that he was going to be a pacifist yet, which was what you outlined in the previous podcast. However, from a pacifist viewpoint and as the Doctor's character, I think it still counts, doesn't it?
Yeah, and on the feminism outlook is that even though the balance between the tribe with the men and the women, with our leading characters, the four main characters, I think there's a real equality to them. There's no leader of the group, and they all just go out there to protect each other. So, for example, they go out and find the Doctor because he's in trouble, and then when they're in trouble, he stands up to the tribe and helps them out. So I think that's really nice as well.
That's a really interesting point, Owen. I suppose that's probably why they made in this episode the Doctor be apart from the rest of the group for most of it. It showed how the three of them work.
Without him
there as a trio, which is a really important skill for a companion, because the companion cannot just be the Doctor's sidekick, can they? And another interesting point here is that there's a bit of a strange thing going on between Susan and between the other two, because by rights, Susan ought to be the leader. She's the one who's got the most TARDIS experience apart from the Doctor. She should know what's going on. However, these two are her teachers.
Yes, and they still treat her like they are her teachers back on Earth. They feel they got a sense of responsibility over her.
I suppose from Ian and Barbara's perspective, that's how they're dealing with this mentally, isn't it? They're still treating it as if it's a school experiment.
Yeah, it's a bit like a school field trip, isn't it?
Yes.
That's the vibe I'm getting.
Look! What is it? There's some of his things! Grandfather, where are you?
Susan, don't panic.
I must find him!
Susan!
I must see!
Well, be careful then.
Ian, look!
It's not much good anymore.
Well, maybe he saw something and went off to investigate.
Leaving this,
Well, what do you think happened?
I don't know. Perhaps he was excited and went off to investigate something as you suggest, but he may have been taken.
I can't see him. I can't find him anywhere. There's not a
Calm
sign of
down,
him.
Susan.
Don't worry. What's the matter? It's his notes. You never leave his notebook. It's too important to him. It's got the key codes of all the machines and the ships. It's got notes of everywhere we've been to. Something terrible happened to him. I know. We must find it.
Susan, we'll find him. I promise you. He can't be far away.
What's on the other side of those rocks?
There's a line of trees. There's a gap in them. It might be a path on the other side.
All right, we'll try there first. Come on.
I'm interested that Susan doesn't have any sort of air of authority here, because I would have expected her to.
In what sense? As in, because she's from Gallifrey and knows what she's doing.
Exactly, and she's presumably had situations before where she's been in difficult situations or she's been without her grandfather.
Well, maybe she hasn't.
Maybe.
Maybe they travelled on safer planets, or maybe they both stuck together. Maybe I think that the Doctor thought it was his first chance without. He could be a bit more free and a bit more going out there on his own, because he thought, oh, she's with her teacher, she'll be fine.
That's really fascinating that he would trust them that much.
I think he must trust them because you obviously could tell from they're both very caring characters. The Doctor can pick up what people are like very quickly. She's been to the school 5 months. He must have picked up stories from Susan about how she liked her teachers and how they were good to her. That could be another way of looking at it.
That's really interesting. We see an amazing difference between Ian and Barbara at this point, don't we?
Yeah, Ian is, again, not believing anything the Doctor is saying. He thinks it's all a trick. And Barbara, I think she just wants to believe it, and she says she does. And in her voice, you can sense the adventure that she's looking forward to.
Well, you said on last week's podcast, didn't you, that Barbara is the one that wants an adventure, whereas Ian just goes along with it. And there's a fantastic exchange between them and the Doctor. I think we've actually got a clip of this.
You say we've gone back in time?
Yes, quite so.
So that when we go out of that door, we won't be in a junkyard in London, in England, in the year 1963.
That is quite correct. Your tone suggests ridicule.
But it is ridiculous. Time doesn't go round and round in circles. You can't get on and off whenever you like in the past or the future.
Really? Where does time go, then?
It doesn't go anywhere. It just happens and then it's finished.
Oh. You're not as doubtful as your friend, I hope.
No.
Barbara, you can't.
I can't help it. I just believe them, that's
If you
all.
could touch the alien's hand and hear the cries of strange birds and watch them wheel in another sky, would that satisfy you?
Yeah, I love that clip. Again, it's showing the two characters and how they both react to this new way of life, this new travelling, that they've gone to another world. Well, not another world. This time they've actually just gone back in time.
It might as well be another world, though.
It feels like another world to them, yes. I think as well, the logic of Ian and the unlogic of the Doctor, and yet how believable, or how we want to believe more what the Doctor is saying, because it just sounds more wonderful.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I wonder how Susan would have fared if she was on her own. Actually, I think we do see a bit of that in the Daleks. I think she does do some stuff on her own there, and we see how she fares as a character in her own right.
But of course, she is just a child at the end of the day, and those three are the adults, and they need to protect her. And of course, she is from Gallifrey, and she does know a lot more than Ian and Barbara, but she still needs to be protected, because that's how adults always act towards kids, even if kids are more in the know. That's how naturally humans react. I'm just going to say we also discussed off there as well about Gallifrey, and are all people from Gallifrey Gallifreyans? Is that how you pronounce it? Or are they all Time Lords, or only the people who go to the Academy the Time Lords? That's something that we're not quite sure, and we want to know, is it discussed in later episodes? And if people do already know, can you leave a comment below on our YouTube if you're watching on YouTube?
Yeah, please do.
Or listening to this on YouTube.
Yeah, even though we're the ones making the podcast, we do not know everything.
And we still want to
clarify that.
Yeah, and we still find it interesting to know what we don't know. It's always good to learn and be educated. That's what Ian and Barbara would approve of.
Exactly, and it's what the Doctor would approve of too.
Eventually, after smoking.
After smoking. I think you did hit the nail on the head with Susan there, which hadn't really occurred to me, which is that even though she's got the most TARDIS experience, she's still a child, and she's used to relying on the adults around her. She's not really used to making decisions in her own right. She's able to work with the adults and manipulate them a bit in the same way that her and the old mother manipulate the other tribespeople, but she's not really used to making a firm decision. I have the impression that what she did in the previous episode, where she insisted on staying on Earth, was an unusual one for her, and even that was overruled by the Doctor as soon as she turned her back. From a political side, I think that this episode shows politics as old as time. It's very effective storytelling in a lot of ways. You've got the leader, you've got the wannabe leader, you've got the person that the leader looks up to, you've got the skeptics, you've got the prize, which is her, and you've got, I suppose, the fake prize, which is fire. The political ideal, the manifesto, in a sense, which is, I will create fire if you choose me as your leader. All of those things you need in a political fairy tale, don't you?
You do.
And it's the same in real life when you see elections. I think very rarely are politicians actually caring about what they claim to be caring about in their manifestos. Although, of course, this being a far more basic sort of story, they do still care about the fire as well, because they need to keep warm. But it's not the primary thing they're the most concerned about, is it? They're concerned about who's going to be the leader. It's all political.
I love how real it all feels. And what I mean by that is how Barbara and Ian react. It's how you would react if you were in that situation. And I always felt when they brought back Doctor Who to 2005, the reason I fell in love with the show was because, again, the same principles of Rose Tyler and the Doctor. This is how the Doctor would be. This is how you respond to the characters, how you would deal in all these situations. And even though I love the Matt Smith era, and I love how Doctor Who's come about since then, especially the Matt Smith one is like a fairy tale. And I love that in Doctor Who, but deep down I think I love the fact of what if the Doctor really was here? How would we as humans react?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I would also say something that's interesting about this episode is that I really feel that the title comes from here. Barbara and Ian, at the beginning of this episode, are both calling the Doctor Dr. Foreman, which is Susan's surname, which she's obviously taken off the door to the junkyard.
And the Doctor goes, Dr. Foreman? Doctor Who?
Yes. I feel that in more modern episodes, they've made a point every time they introduce a new companion of saying, Doctor Who, just to remind you of the title of the show.
I love that, though.
I do love it, but at the same time, I also feel like it's a little bit forced in. It doesn't feel like it does in this one, where for the first time, you're actually thinking, but Doctor Who? And sometimes I wonder how they came up with the title. When you first heard of this show, before you ever watched an episode, did you think that Doctor Who was his name?
Yes.
I was exactly the same. And I remember when I was watching the episode Rose, it's like, he would just say, I'm the Doctor. And I thought, oh, when's he going to call himself Doctor Who then?
I think even later he does call himself Doctor Who, which again causes a bit of debate between fans, yeah.
Well, in later episodes? Because I know the Peter Cushing character is called
Peter
Doctor
Cushing
Who.
I might be wrong again, we haven't seen them all yet, so it's hard to discuss it.
Well, we did talk about maybe when we go through all the episodes, doing some of these podcasts on Peter Cushing films, didn't we? Maybe one day we will.
Well, they're the first ones I ever actually saw, and they terrified me. I even bought a Dalek and a Peter Cushing action figure. Then when it came back in 2005, I started watching it again and got really into it.
So that's really cool. So when you were a kid, so what kind of year would that have been?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Mid-90s?
Yeah, mid-90s probably. And saying that though, I did actually watch William Hartnell when I was a kid, not knowing it was Doctor Who for some reason. And it's one of the episodes when they turn into really small and they're amongst all the insects and creatures around.
I have not seen that episode, and I'm really looking forward to getting to it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I just didn't know it was Doctor Who for some reason. How bizarre. It just came on, they did repeats in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, that's good, amazing. So time for our star ratings, I think. Story. Last time I said that although the character's amazing, the story was a bit lacking. This episode, I think, more than made up for that. We've got the TARDIS crew story and the story about the cave dwellers, both running together. It's a 25-minute episode, and they're both really fleshed out. And actually, it goes to show that you don't need long 45-minute to an hour episodes to tell a good story. Would you be up for giving it a 5?
Pretty steep for me.
Interesting. I just think the story's told too perfectly to give it anything lower.
Yeah, it's really thought out structured story, but I just think of the amazing, great ones to come.
Okay.
I can't really put it against that one.
Okay, let's give it a 4 then.
Okay.
Which is fantastic. Character. Last time I gave the characters a 5.
I think a 4 this time, or...
Yeah, I think a 4.
Yeah.
They've had a harder job this time because they've got a lot more characters to deal with. I think that a lot of the individual characters would be enough to be giving a 5 standard. However, they've just got too many, they've been able to fit them in. We don't find out quite as much about Hawk or about the old mother as I would like to, or even about her. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that in the next episodes.
They give you enough to know the characteristics of each one. That's really well done. But as you say, you want a bit more from them, don't you?
So let's give it a 4. Tech. I wasn't that impressed by the tech in this episode, I'll be honest. Not because...
Oh, really?
Mainly because I didn't think there was that much to do. Like, the TARDIS doors opened and closed with a cool sound effect, but that was pretty much it.
Well, yeah, they cleverly wrote a story where they didn't actually have to use that much technical stuff, I suppose.
They did. And I think that gives credit to the story, but I don't think we can give credit to tech for an episode that doesn't require any
That
tech.
much tech, yeah, okay. 2 then?
2, yeah. Which is, what did we say? You must be upgraded.
Wonderful Cyberman impression.
And on a feminism side, we've got Susan and Barbara. We've got her and the old mother. We've got some great women characters in both. All of them show their skills. I wouldn't say it was quite enough to give it a 5, but I would say a 4. Would you agree?
I agree with you there, yeah.
Giving this episode a total mean score of 3.5, which is an Earth Standard and a Half. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. We hope that you still stick with us and watch the shows and then listen to us afterwards like we're doing. And what is the next episode going to be called?
The next episode is called The Forest of Fear.
And it's part 3 of
the first serial. I am George, and this is my co-host Owen. Thank you for listening.
Bye. Allons-y.